Okay, I decided to try something new today that I've never done before, which is use PowerPoint. I know nothing about computers. I'm terrible at this stuff, but we'll give it a whirl, okay? Here. Yeah. I do better here because it's closer to me. So, I'm clicking this on, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about prayer today. And as we do, I want to talk about how we approach it. Please keep in mind that whatever we talk about, we are talking about the truth. The truth is really relative to the game that you're playing. Because every game has its own assumptions. And I know this is kind of theoretical, but I'm going to give you an example. You say after me the letter that comes after each letter I say. A, C, E, G. Is it always H after G? No? Is it always H after G? Yeah, but what's another possibility? How about A? Anybody here know anything about music? You get what I'm saying? On a musical scale, if you're talking about the notes, after G comes A. So you see, it depends on which game you're playing, which base you're in mathematics. And the same thing is true within religion and prayer. And as I explained last time, there's no question that whatever we do in terms of what Judaism believes, you have to know the context, the history, the culture, all of that, which comes together to make up a sense of what it is that we do. So, what I'd like to first of all do for you is to take a look at the Jewish views of God. So, are we ready to, where's this clicker? Is this, no, that doesn't look like it. I want to try. She said it was a clicker. Okay, now I've got to make sure that you all have an unobstructed view. Huh? Oh, okay. From among you, views of God. Any suggestions? How do you all see God? Know God, experience God. Don't think others of God. Creator. What else? I'm sorry? A father. Nurturer. How many of you pray to God? Okay. How many of you are answered by God? How do you know? You hear Him. Okay. So, can you sort of explain in human terms how that happens? Okay, we're going to talk about that. And I may get a one that's different than the first one. So let me just try this and make sure I can do it. Yes, here we go. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? This was easier than handing it out. Is that all right with everybody? Okay. Here's what I want to do. And I want to show you that within Judaism, there have been three different ways of looking at God. And that's not to say that one's right and one's wrong. And it's not to say that as Jews, we don't know all three ways of looking at thinking of God. If you look beginning on the far left, until about the 1920s, we had the biblical, and the Talmud is the book of Jewish law and understanding, which comes after the Bible, starting around 200 BC. And that view of God is what most of us would consider the traditional view. This is a personal God. This is a God who is known in a personal, almost anthropomorphic, not human, but we speak of this God in human terms. And therefore, this is a God who, and I lost my microphone, this is a God, bear with me, who is all-knowing, omniscient, knows what's going to happen in the future, all-powerful, created the world, hears prayers and answers them, works miracles, is one and alone, spiritual being who expresses love for the created world, and is all good. This is a personal God who reacts to humans as a super parent and operates outside of us. Does that sound okay? Now, that view of God, or way of looking at God, runs into a slight problem in this area, and that is when bad things happen to good people. Because how can a good God, who is all-powerful and all-knowing, let bad things happen to good people? It's a huge problem. Something's wrong. And then what happens as a result of that is philosophers jump in and say, well, the bad things really aren't bad, or God's limited and is out to lunch when he was most needed. All these kinds of things go in to save the theory. But, by the same token, when you're in need, there is no doubt in my mind that people, based on their training as youngsters, all jump up and ask God for help as that superintendent. Anything that anybody wants to say about that? Is it real clear? Okay. Starting around the 1960s, I would say, but really, actually, even the 1920s or so, and that's really what that should say. Even in the 1920s, a movement in terms of theological belief was already afoot, and it was afoot not only in Judaism, but in Christianity as well. And that's because of this problem of evil that I spoke about. That maybe God isn't a person, or personal. That maybe we can understand or sense God better if God is a concept or an idea. For example, you notice if you look at nature that the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and you can count on that. That there are 4 seasons, except in Florida. You can count on that. That there's, gravity. So if I hold this and let go of it, it's going to fall to the ground. And what theologians would say, both Jewish and Christian, is that there is order to nature. That it's a plan to nature. And that as a result, there has to be an organizer, an architect, who put it all together. And therefore, that is God. Or you have people like Mordecai Kaplan and Eric Fromm. He's the psychiatrist. He is a Reconstructionist who is a Jew who redid Orthodox and conservative Judaism to say that there are no miracles in the Bible. We can give scientific explanations for all of them. He reconstructed the Jewish stories. That's Reconstruction. That God is the best in you, and that when human beings reach out and do that which is right and proper, that God is present in that midst. How many of you here are more comfortable with that idea of God than you are with a personal God? Raise your hand. Okay. Excellent. And again, one's not better, one's not worse. They're just very different. So in this one, God is a belief and personal. In this one, God is an idea or a force, impersonal. Now, around the 1960s, these two come together in a most incredible way. And it has resulted in, and again you find it in Judaism as well as Christianity, something called existentialism. How many here have ever heard of existentialism? Are you familiar with it? Do you know what it is? Sort of. Okay. Existentialism in general says something is true in your experience, it makes a difference in your life. Let me give you an example. How do you know that God is present? How do you know that God is present when you come to services and worship? Anybody? Here's an existentialist answer from an example in my own experience. In 1979 in Jackson, Mississippi, where I was the rabbi, we all went to sleep on a Friday night. It had been raining and raining and raining. And by Saturday morning, when I got up and turned the television on, it showed pictures of an enormous flood in our city. And I got on my bicycle and pedaled down on Saturday morning early, about 2 blocks down my street. And in a more low-lying area, all I could see was for miles an enormous lake and rooftops. And I was able throughout that week until the water receded to literally canoe in the front door and then go through the house and out the back door of many of my congregants. 23 of my congregants lost everything they had and had no flood insurance. The only thing left was the foundation, the concrete foundation, the studs, and the roof. As soon as the water went down, we got into teams to go into the houses and clean them up. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced anything like this before, but you need to get in there quickly and disinfect, or it gets very, very dangerous. We had to rip up carpets. We had to take furniture and throw it just out on the street. And once you have everything stripped down, you have to get disinfectant and spray it everywhere. And for a good part of it, we did it in waiters. When Friday night, Shabbat, our time of worship came, all of us came together at the synagogue to have Friday night services. And it's very interesting. We came in whatever we were wearing. And what happened is that we read in English and Hebrew, but in English, the very same prayers we have read for years and years and years. Day in, Friday night in and Friday night out. One of the prayers says, and we know that God is there to uphold the needy and to heal the sick. We have all read that over and over. It was rote and it was meaningless. But on that night, given what each of us brought in with us, and given those words and the sadness and loss that those people were feeling, in an instant, those words suddenly flew off the page, meant more than anything that had ever probably been read in that synagogue, and the whole congregation burst out into tears. An existentialist would say, God was present in that moment. When I wrap my arms around my wife, Donna, of 42, almost 43 years, and give her a hug, no one, neither she nor I, can put into words what that feeling is. There's just something there. And when we leave that embrace, in some small way, both she and I are a little bit changed. One would say that God is present in that particular moment. One of the greatest things that I can find happening is that when people come and hear my sermons on Friday night, that they fall asleep. And that their minds start to wander. And that may sound odd, but what sometimes happens is I can say something in a sermon that triggers something that they've brought in with them. And when that happens, I'm no longer in there, and instead, they and God